Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friedemann Findeisen show. This is Friedemann Findeisen from Holistic Songwriting. Hope you guys are doing mighty fine. So this is the first episode that we're doing that is purely audio. Everything else before this has been video and audio as well. This one is just going to be me talking. So you get to listen to my German accent for much longer, actually, than the other episodes. Because I personally love long podcasts. So this is going to be targeted at more like the 45 to 60 minute mark. And let's see how we're going to do with that. For this episode, I've decided I want to do a top 10, my top 10 of my favorite movies that have to do with music. This is just going to be a personal preference of the movies that I love watching that have taught me something or that I think show the music industry from a realistic side in some way, or maybe they just have good songs or they're just enjoyable. And so I just wanted to share these 10 movies with you guys, starting with number 10, Begin Again, which is a movie from 2013 directed by John Carney, who's a fantastic director who I think really understands how music works and how the whole band experience works. There's a ton of movies out there that are about music, but they don't really capture the spirit or the experience of making music together in a small room. And John really understands how to capture that energy in a room when you're writing a song, when you're rehearsing a song. Now, Begin Again, granted, is my least favorite movie by John Carney. And I think I also saw it at a bad time. I was not doing really well with my own music career when I saw it. It is about marketing and about getting out there and stuff like that. And these were all parts of my life that I thought were lacking. So it just hit me at a bad time, I think. But it is a good movie. The music, I'm not so super fond of, but I like the acting. There's a couple of good scenes. There's one scene in particular which I thought was really cool in that it reflects the way that I think about writing music. And in that scene, you see Keira Knightley, who is kind of the star of the movie. She's the musician. She's on stage performing like this really simple pop song with a guitar. And the producer walks in, sees her, and no one's really paying attention to her. The song isn't that great. But he looks at it and he sees it through different eyes because what he's hearing is a full production. And so his look sort of glances over from her to the drum set, which is empty. But then we see the drumsticks sort of being lifted into the air as if by magic, like no one's holding them. And they start playing this groove under what she's singing. And then we go over to the bass guitar, and that is being picked up and like played by no one essentially. But we hear all these instruments slowly filling up the arrangement. And it turns into like a pop song that we could hear on the radio. I like that because it reflects so much what I do with holistic songwriting. Whenever I'm sent songs by you guys through the website, through Holistic Songwriting, that's kind of what I have to do in 70 to 80% of the songs. A lot of the songs that I get aren't finished. A lot of the times it's just a demo of someone playing guitar or piano and singing to it. And what I have to do, what my biggest job is to envision how that song would sound like if it was done. And so what I'm hearing is those sticks being raised into the air and playing as if by magic. And I'm hearing all this stuff in my head. I hear those arrangements, and I hear string players, and I hear piano, and I hear everything that's not there. And I feel like that's a big part of what I do with holistic songwriting. And the same thing goes for my writing as well, because whenever I'm hearing a very simple track, maybe I just have a drum groove, I keep hearing all these possible paths that I could take with that song. And so I feel like that's a vital part of being a good songwriter. And that's what I like about this movie, and that's probably why that's my favorite scene from that movie. So that is Begin Again, Can a Song Save Your Life, with Keira Knightley from John Carney in 2013. That was my number 10. Number 9 is a movie called Crazy Heart. This is a movie about the country scene, starring Jeff Bridges as this really worn-down country musician who was once famous, and now just the 50-plus ladies are, cheering for him at these concerts, and he's playing these really small locations. What I like about the movie is, first of all, it has a lot of heart. The entire movie could be told just by listening to the songs. So if you listen to the soundtrack, it's basically going to tell you the movie. That's what I like. So the music, the lyrics, and the music itself really reflect what's going on in the story. It's great songs. I'm not a big country fan myself, but I love the songs in Crazy Heart and have listened to them outside of the movie, which is always a good sign. I think the whole movie just really, really works. Great acting, performances. It's a great story. It is a drama first and a music film second. But what I like about it is that both of them work together really well. Like the music and the drama in the movie itself, they work in tandem. So they're not two separate things, but they are very strongly interconnected. So that is my number 9, Crazy Heart. My number 8 is, coincidentally, a movie called 8 Mile, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's the Eminem documentary, if you want to call it that. It's kind of his path to success, and it kind of ends at the point where really things start taking off for him. It's really about that early phase of his struggles in his youth, basically. And it's a really good movie. In general, it's just a great drama. It has some fantastic rap sequences. It's really interesting to see the background of where rap music came from, at least in that neighborhood. I found it really, really fascinating. I think Eminem is doing a fine job as an actor on top of it. The music is fantastic. I'm a big Eminem fan myself. So seeing this movie just really, I don't know, it really spoke to me. I really, really enjoy that movie. So that is my number 8, 8 Mile. Number 7 is a movie called Music and Lyrics, starring Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore. That is really like kind of a rom-com. I personally love all sorts of movies, so I know a lot of guys have problems with rom-coms. I really just don't mind them. I just can watch anything. Music and Lyrics is a movie about an elderly songwriter, Hugh Grant, who also had his peak in his career a couple of years ago, and who's still touring like smaller and smaller clubs. And again, like his fans are the elderly, basically. It fits his character really well because he does look like an old rock star. But the really strong part of this movie, I think, is the music. It is just so well written. All of the songs fit each of the situations just perfectly. There's a couple of different styles that you will hear in this. There's some 80s pop, which is perfect. Like it could have been a hit song in that time period. Then we got the modern pop songs. Those are the songs that are written by the two main characters. And those are songs that they would write. It fits their character, which I think is really strong in this movie. Every single song fits the characters of the artists that are singing or performing them. And then we have the crass contradiction to that, which is like sort of the mainstream pop artist, sort of like a Shakira-like artist. And the songs that she sings are also something that I could imagine in the charts. It's an artist that just makes sense. You see her for the first time and you're thinking, yeah, that's something that I could see in the charts. So every single thing in this movie musically makes complete sense. The only thing where it just kind of stretches it a little bit is that the theme song of the entire movie that Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore write together, I don't think would be something that the Shakira person in this movie would probably sing. Maybe as a sort of homage, but not really something that she would put on her album. I don't think it would really fit. That's the only little caveat I have with it. Other than that, I think it's a really well-made movie. It has some funny bits as well. I think it portrays the music industry in some funny and clever ways, driving it slightly over the edge with some of its points, obviously, to kind of get the point across, especially when it comes to the pop and Shakira world of this movie. But other than that, I think it's a very well-made movie with great songs that understands its characters and understands the music industry. My number 6 is not a movie, is a TV series, and it's probably going to be a little bit difficult for you to get a hold of it because it's an Amazon exclusive, but it's called Mozart in the Jungle. Mozart in the Jungle is a show that you can only get if you have Amazon Prime, which I recommend, by the way. Amazon Prime is great. But it's a show about an orchestra that's being led by this new conductor named Rodrigo. And he's this crazy, free-spirited Italian dude who's trying to turn the orchestra around and help the orchestra to survive. And because obviously the classical music is dying, and so he has to find some ways to keep the whole thing alive. What I like about it is, first of all, I've been a conductor myself for a couple of times. I've conducted a couple of orchestras, and I just really found it enjoyable to see all the different instrument sections portrayed by these different characters. And I found that all of it it hits the nail on the head. Like, this was written by someone who gets how classical orchestras work. You have the really nice cellist, you have the bitches in the woodwind section. It just, all of that is just so my experience with orchestras. It's hilarious how close it is to reality, first of all. Then everyone there is smoking pot and they're all just having sex with everyone else on the orchestra. So it's a very light, very fun, very modern approach to the whole subject. Like, it's not a very serious, like, oh, this is classical music and we have to talk about Beethoven all the time. No, it's a very enjoyable, very fun watch, first and foremost. It takes some liberties with that as well. overall, like there's some scenes that I think are a little bit ridiculous, like drinking games that involve playing various classical instruments. That is like right in the pilot of the series that I thought were a little bit ridiculous, but still fun. You know, it plays in this kind of alternative universe where that's a thing. And I thought it was very much a fun watch. I'm currently somewhere in season 2. Very funny, very well researched. All the characters match what they are really like. The different instrument sections are really like in reality, I guess. So it very much reflected my experiences with orchestras. And yeah, if you're at all interested in any of that, I think it's something that you should look into it. My number 5 is again a movie by John Carney, and this is the one that made him famous since it won the Audience Award at the Sundance Film Festival in, I believe, 2007. And it later went on to win him an Oscar for the best song in a movie. So best, what's it called, soundtrack, original soundtrack? This is a movie that was made for $130,000, which is, in the movie industry, not even a low-budget movie. That's a no-budget movie. It's made for almost no money. It doesn't use any lighting. Everything it uses is original lighting. So the sun, and if there's a light bulb somewhere in the scene, like a lamp, that's the only lighting that's used. It's filmed on location in the apartments of crew members. So it's made for no money at all. What's nice about this movie is, by the way, it's called Once. It just really captures this Irish sensibility of songwriting so well. There's so many scenes in this movie that I just love. There's a little bit of a rom-com aspect to it as well. That part I'm not so crazy about. I think I've seen that done better in other movies. But the musical aspects in this movie are so well captured on film. And again, John Carney, the director, really understands this sensibility of making music together. And he doesn't glorify it. He doesn't magnify it into something as we see in like Disney movies or something like that, right? Or that movie, what is it called? Sing, I think. Came out a couple of months ago. There was a DreamWorks movie, I think. It doesn't do that. Like, it's very much true to how it really is to write a song. And so we see just a guy sitting on his bed, jamming around on his guitar and kind of coming up with a song. And that I really love. Like, there are some small freedoms that the movie takes. Like, you know, some characters learn a song very, very quickly. But that's fine with me. The songs are extremely strong. John Carney didn't write them on this one, coincidentally. He did for most of his other movies. This one was written by the two main characters in the movie. By the way, the main character was in a band together with John Carney. John Carney was the bass player in this band, so that's probably how they met. It's a fantastic movie. There's a couple of scenes that I think are worth mentioning. For example, one scene where there's like this Irish... That's not a pub, actually. Like, it's someone's house. Everyone just meets, kind of brings their instrument, and they play old folk songs. And it's just so well done. Like, you get how this music came to be and how people sing together and everyone's just harmonizing with each other. People are jamming on top of each other. It's just a great fun watch. And what this movie reminded me of was, because I watched this movie in a phase where I was really thinking about music in very business-like terms. And what I liked about it is something that I heard a very famous producer say. I forgot who it was. The goal of a great writing session is to capture the energy of two writers or more writers together. And if you can keep that energy that was put into the song at that early stage and keep that energy all throughout the process until the very finished product, then you've got yourself a hit song. In Once, there is a scene where, as I said, all these people sit together and they just kind of play around, jam together. And it just made me think of how great it is to be sitting in a room with talented musicians and everyone just kind of riffs off of each other. How that works is just magic to me. And it's true that the greatest writing sessions work like that. It's not two people doing business together. It's just two people sitting together and making music. And it just came at the right time for me, that scene, I think. Again, Once, fantastic movie. I want to wrap this up kind of quickly because I want to get to my top 4. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. My number 4 is a movie also by John Carney, and this is the last one on this list. And this is definitely my favorite John Carney movie. I just saw it a couple of months ago. This is a movie from 2016 called Sing Street. And John Carney himself calls it a stealth musical. He's a big musical fan. I am not, which is also why La La Land is not on this list, even though I think it's a great movie. Also, don't really consider it a music movie because it's not really a movie about the music. It just has music in it. Sing Street. So this one is about the music of Joy Division and those kind of rock and roll bands from back in the day. And it's about this kid who goes to this very conservative college, and he starts a band. And it's about filming the music videos, and there's also a little bit of a romance involved, obviously. It is just a great, fun movie. It's dramatic, it's funny. The songs, again, hit the nail right on the head. What I like about this movie is, so it's about a bunch of kids, right? All his other movies are about grown-ups. Sing Street is about a couple of kids who don't know any better. And they just like look up to their idols, and they just try to imitate what they're doing, which is exactly what everyone does when they start making music. So, man, this one just works on so many levels, and I love Sing Street to bits. I think it's a fantastic movie. It completely flew under my radar when it first came out. I just saw like a review on it on BBC, and the guy said, like, this is from John Carney, the guy who had made Once. And I was like, oh, wow, I got to check this out then. And it's a fantastic movie. I don't know why it didn't get any more buzz. I think it's great. It captures the era so well. It understands the music of that time. Overall, it's just a fantastic movie. I love it, love it, love it. So definitely check out Sing Street. My number 3 is a movie that won the Oscar for its supporting actor, J.K. Simmons, in 2014. It's directed by Damien Chazelle, and it's a movie called Whiplash. Obviously, this movie had to be on my list since I have studied jazz guitar and kind of know what that's like to study an instrument and to fight your own body. And so Whiplash is about a drummer who goes to a conservatory in New York, a jazz conservatory. And he's drilled by his mentor, which is J.K. Simmons, to just be better and quicker and play the swing more beautifully. And it's a hard watch. I'm going to tell you that. Like, it's not a fun movie. Like, this one is really all about the dedication and the strength you have to put into making music and becoming a perfect musician. And obviously, you cannot be perfect, but that's kind of the tension that this movie is playing with. You know, the main character basically breaks off all of his connections to his relationships, and all of his life just becomes about being the perfect drummer. I love that conflict because I've had that myself in Freiburg, where every day I would practice for a couple of hours, and I really felt that my mind just wanted me to be able to play some things that my body just couldn't do yet. And it was this constant conflict with myself, with my own body, of not being able to play as quickly as I wanted to, or as beautifully, or not hitting the right notes, stuff like that. It's just that constant fight that you have with your own body. This is why I'm so fascinated with movies that pick up on that struggle. That's why one of my favorite movies is Black Swan by Darren Aronofsky, and is all of his other movies as well, because his big theme in all of his movies is that fight with yourself for your artistry. You fight with your body. It's the same with The Wrestler. It's to a certain extent also with Requiem for a Dream. So I really understand this struggle. And if you have that too, if you understand what it's like to fight your own body, then I think Whiplash will be a very interesting watch. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It was like watching an extremely tense psycho thriller for me. It was an amazing watch. And the finale is absolutely breathtaking. It's one of the best movies ever made about jazz music. That is not going to be only enjoyable to jazz musicians, but to everyone, I think, who wants to see the effort and dedication that goes into performing a single piece of music. It is a fantastic watch with a great cast. Miles Teller is doing a really great job as the drummer, and he learned a lot of the drums for this movie. So he actually plays a lot of the drums in this movie. Not too well, I might add, but it's fine. I mean, he's still an actor. I get that. The movie just understands how it is to be in a conservatory. Obviously, it's going over the edge a little bit. My conservatory experience was a lot less harsh, although there have been certain comments thrown at me that were equally heavy. Like, I remember, that wasn't me, coincidentally, but I remember there was a band coaching once, and the guitarist, basically the coaching was stopped by the professor, and he asked the guitarist, how much do you practice each day? And he said, 8 hours. And that was true, by the way. I knew the guy, so he really practiced every day for 8 hours. What does the professor say? He says, well, you should. And that's a fucked up thing to say to someone who is already putting in so much work into this, who has a huge dedication to his craft, to tell him, yeah, well, you have to get better. You have to keep doing that, otherwise you're not going to get there. Terrible thing to say. Another thing that I heard from someone was, I think it was the same coach, actually. They were practicing, and he stopped the band cold after the first bar. And he said, he talked to the drummer saying, your count in wasn't on time. So let's do the count in again. And the drummer goes 1, 2, 3, 4. No, stop. Do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now stop. Do it again. They would do this for half an hour while the rest of the band was sitting there waiting for the drummer to play just those first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, those first clicks on time. Imagine what pressure that must be for the drummer. So, people say that all of this is exaggerating how it is to be in a conservatory. For me, I know this experience. I know what it feels like to be in a conservatory, and the way it was for me, it kind of reflected that as well. I mean, all that put aside, I loved my time at both my conservatories. I had a great time at both of them, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. But it was very, very hard. And again, that constant struggle with myself was certainly something that I recognize again in this movie. So that's why I love Whiplash, and it's one of my top 3 movies. So definitely check that one out if you haven't yet. My number 2 is a movie that probably most of you haven't heard yet, and that's because it's really kind of under everyone's radar, I think. Like, I just heard about it because I am a huge fan of the director, Christopher Guest. And he also makes a lot of movies about musicians from various genres, similarly to John Carney. And my number 1 is also one of his movies. And if you can't guess it by now, then you probably haven't heard of Christopher Guest yet. But Christopher Guest, he makes these mockumentaries. So these are kind of documentaries that are not real. So they're pretending to be real. In the shape of a documentary, something like, The Office or Parks and Rec, something like that. So he kind of started this whole thing with my number 1 pick, which I'm going to mention in a second. And A Mighty Wind is one of my favorite movies of his. It's about the folk scene, and a famous producer who used to produce all these really big folk artists. That person dies. That producer dies. That happens before the movie starts. And in honor of his death, they want to do like this revival musical of all these artists who he used to have under his wings about 20 years ago. So all of these artists have to get together and make this revival concert. And obviously, a lot of them are a lot older now. Some of them don't make music anymore. Some of them are already senile and have their troubles playing the instruments right or singing the lines. First of all, it's a hilarious watch. It's one of the funniest movies on this list. Christopher Guest is a master of staging scenes that look like they're from real life. Like, as I said, it's a mockumentary, so it has that very real feel to it. And that's what I love about this movie. It really feels as if we're getting a look behind the scenes of all of these really famous artists, even though they're all actors. And by the way, Christopher Guest always uses the same actors for all of his movies. And it feels like we're getting this behind the scenes look. We get to look behind the curtain and see what these artists are really like and how they're struggling with themselves, with each other, and with their music. And it's absolutely hilarious. It is a comedy first and foremost, but the music is great, fits every single performer. The folk scene, I think, is portrayed really well in this movie, and it's just an overall fun movie. It has some laugh-out-loud moments. It's, to me, one of the funniest movies about the music industry and one of the funniest movies in general of all time. If you haven't seen A Mighty Wind, you have to check it out. It's absolutely fantastic. Which brings us to my number 1, which, as I said already, is also by Christopher Guest. And if you haven't guessed it yet, it's Spinal Tap. Obviously, it had to be Spinal Tap. I'm a huge fan of this movie. If you haven't heard of it, this was a movie that came out, I think, in 82, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Spinal Tap is, again, a mockumentary about this metal/rock band in the 80s, early 90s, I think, that also had their peak already, and they're on their second America tour, and they're playing these kind of like half as big clubs as they used to. Again, it's just one of the funniest movies you've ever seen. The dialogues, it's got this very raw, very real feel to it. The characters are hilarious. All of them have their own little quirks, and they're so ridiculous. But it really fits that style of the metal genre. Personally, I don't really love that scene, that music scene that much. But just watching all of those situations that this band goes through, it had me laughing out loud because so many of these situations I have been through myself. It just rings true so much. Like there's so many situations in that movie that remind me of something that I've gone through in my career. There's one show where they start their show in these cocoons, right? Like these plastic cocoons, and once the song starts, everyone just like these cocoons are supposed to open and all the musicians jump out of them and start playing. Unfortunately, the bass guitarist's cocoon is kind of stuck, so he has to play the entire song in that cocoon. Like one of the stagehands is like out there with a blowtorch trying to open up the freaking cocoon. Stuff like that. If you think that sort of thing is kind of funny, then you have to check out Spinal Tap. It's full of these little moments of stupidity, of ignorance, of bad luck, of all of that stuff. And the nice thing is, too, that a lot of the situations from the movie are actually taken from real life bands. So, for example, in one of the scenes, they kind of realize that they're struggling a little bit. And so one of them says, the guitarist says, you know what we should do? Stonehenge. We should do Stonehenge. They're all Americans speaking in British accents. And he says, we have to do Stonehenge. This used to be your big show, so let's do just that again. And the manager says, okay, sure. What am I supposed to do? He says, okay, look, here's what we do. The guitarist takes out a napkin and like draws this picture of one of the monoliths, right? The, stone configurations. You know what I'm talking about, right? The Stonehenge thing. And he like writes in the dimensions, etc. Gives it to the manager. And he says, I'll take care of it. It's going to be done for the next show. So next scene, we get a cut to the manager with the prop artist. And she has made this little prop of Stonehenge, which is about, 2 feet high or something like that. And the manager says, yeah, this looks great. This is going to be perfect. So is this going to be how the final thing is going to look? And the prop artist goes like, what do you mean? That's the final piece. This is the final piece. Turns out that the guitarist, while he had written on that napkin, wrote 6-inch instead of 6 feet. Or 16-inch instead of 16 feet. Like, I don't really get the metrics of you Americans. Sorry, guys. So the dimensions are completely off. And so then the next scene, we get this hard cut to one of their concerts. And what's supposed to happen is the giant Stonehenge stone configuration is supposed to be lowered from the ceiling. And it's supposed to look huge. But what actually comes down from the ceiling is this tiny little Stonehenge. And it just looks so ridiculous. And the faces of the musicians are just priceless. And this was taken from an actual event that really happened with another band where they switched up inches with feet. And what happened with them was that it was way too big. Everything was way too big. And so they had to rehearse their entire set. They had to rent this huge hall just to be able to rehearse their sets because the props wouldn't fit in any smaller location. So this is taken from real life and transformed into something in Spinal Tap, which is, I think, one of the reasons why Spinal Tap feels so friggin' real, because it really captures the way metal bands and rock bands in those times were. It's got that in common with most of the movies on my list, I think, is that it captures a certain style of musicians really well. And what you have to know about the music industry is that every industry is so, so different. Like the rap industry, for example, the hip-hop industry is really new to me. I have a couple of rappers in my Skype sessions, and what they keep telling me about the industry is just fascinating to me. Like it's so different than any of the other industries that I work in. And the film industry, again, is a completely different ballgame, again. So, those movies, I think, we have a metal one, we have got one that's about folk, one about jazz, one about, the rock and roll sound, one about singer-songwriters, one about classical music, one about pop, one about rap, hip-hop, one about country music, and one about, the Begin Again is kind of a pop music one, I guess. So you have a broad spectrum of different styles here. And I think all of them represent their style really, really well. So if you want to learn a little bit more about these styles, I think this is a good place to start, and an enjoyable one as well. Like I'm a big fan of enjoyable movies. I personally don't really love to watch heavy dramas in my music movies. I want my music movies to be light. So they're all really enjoyable to watch is what I'm trying to say here. So you're not going to sit there feeling like, oh, I'm just doing this to study. You're going to feel like you're doing this for fun. After all of these, I want to mention one more movie, and that is because I personally love watching terrible movies. I'm a big fan of movies like The Room or The Evil Dead or movies like that are just kind of trash and really terribly made. I just enjoy watching those because it's so much fun to poke fun at them. And So I wanted to mention one more movie that I think is probably the worst music movie ever made, and it's about the DJ world. It's a movie called We Are Your Friends, featuring Zac Efron, who's already, that's already a big stamp for me saying don't watch this movie. But I ended up watching it, mostly because of my girlfriend, and it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. What this movie is really trying to do is it's trying to convince you that being a DJ is this really difficult, very hard job, and that it's about self-expression, and that you're really an artist when you're a DJ. First of all, I have my doubts about that. I think being a DJ is more of a technical thing. Obviously, there's DJs who produce themselves, then they're producers, then they're artists. I get that. That's a different thing. In this one, it's really about a dude. I mean, he's producing his own music, but first of all of the music in this movie is just terrible. I love electronic dance music, really don't have a problem with that, but the music in this movie is just so bad, so bland, so boring, so superficial. It's just the worst music for a movie you've ever heard. It just makes me cringe every time I hear one of the pieces in that movie. It's just so boring. Everything, all of it. It's just, the music is just terrible. So the music doesn't work, which is already a big no-no for a movie for me if it's about music. Secondly, it teaches you some lessons that I think are very questionable. Like there's one part in it where they try to make it a little bit more scientific, and he goes like, okay, so if you want to have a set of a great DJ set, then you got to start your set at 100 BPM and sort of like that, because that's the way the heartbeat is. And then you kind of amp it up to 110 BPM, but do it slowly so no one notices. And it's this scientific approach to it, which I'm sure might be right. I'm not a DJ myself, so that might be a thing. Just the way that it's done is just so ridiculous. It's, it makes me cringe just when I think of it. But the worst part of all of it is the finale. That part is, that's cringe heaven. That's the worst. It's the worst. So I'll tell you what happens. So during the entire movie, all this stuff happens, right? Big surprise. Stuff happens. Wow, that's a great summary, Friedemann. So like one of the big things that happens in this movie is that one of his friends dies, which just happens out of nowhere. Like this movie is kind of like a nothing, like it doesn't evoke any emotions within you. And then all of a sudden we're supposed to care about one of his friends dying, which is already really weird and ridiculous. But anyways, like I just really didn't care. Like none of the characters really spoke to me. Like they all seem to be just out for the fame and for the money. And I hate that about music movies already. Like if it's all about music and it's all about fame and money, if that's the only goal of all the characters, and that's what it seemed to be, it was just like, oh no, we need more money and we need to get out of this shithole. That's all it is for us. It's not about the music. It's not about self-expression or about making this world a better place. No, it's just about money and, riding an expensive Ferrari or whatever. That already just freaks me out. Anyway, so that last scene is kind of the big moment of the movie. That's kind of what everything is leading up to. And he's playing at this festival, and the way it's played up is already kind of ridiculous. Like, all the music stops. It's completely silent. All these people are looking at him. Everyone just wonders, what's he going to do? First of all, at a music festival, there's always going to be music playing, even if I'm setting up my DJ stuff, right? So that's unrealistic, but fine. That's a stylistic choice for drama. I get that part. But it feels very, very unrealistic and very stupid at that point. But then the worst part happens, because then we go back through the movie and we see some of the sections of the movie, some of the scenes from the movie again, and some of the sounds from those scenes are picked up, and we can hear them in the production that he's made for this final concert. Where do I even start? First of all, the music is terrible. It's just so bland and so boring. It's supposed to make us care that his friend died, and it could have been a good scene if the music was better and a little bit more emotional. But instead, it's just, here's some dance music. But it's not even like fun or energetic or good dance music. It's just, here's some dance music. Here's some stuff that you could potentially dance to if you were bored. So that's one thing. And then there's this message that his mentor kind of tells him in the middle of the movie that if you produce music, it has to sound real and has to have organic instruments. And so, he goes in this flashback that we see in that last scene. He goes back to all the places that he visited, and he records, zippers and wind chimes, and then he puts them into his production. And that might be a fun little idea, but imagine a dance song with wind chimes and zippers. Does that sound like fun to you? No, it doesn't really, because those just wouldn't work in an EDM song. Like you would have to do a lot of stuff to them to make that sound cool. And so it's just there for, the story's sake, but it doesn't make any sense. musically. And that's what I hate about this movie. I mean, the only thing that kind of ties the story together with the music is that they're both extremely bland and have really nothing to say other than, yeah, it's all about the money and, you know, pretending that being a DJ is this really artistic thing. I'm not dissing our DJs here. We just recently played right before a DJ, and the DJ did a really great job, and he had a really great set. He really managed the audience well, so I'm a lot of respect for that. But I wouldn't really consider them artists. I consider them performers first and foremost. And what this movie is trying to tell us, that it's a science and that it's this huge, high form of art and that it has to be respected, just makes me cringe a lot. And that last sequence is one of the worst scenes that I've ever seen in a movie. It is so ridiculous. It's obviously trying to play with your emotions, but it's so failing at that, which is ultimately why I love this movie. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. So if you love the experience of watching shitty movies and making fun of them, I think you're going to enjoy this one. Okay, I've been riffing on about We Are Your Friends for a really long time now. So how about we get to the question section of this podcast? Again, I got an email from Raleigh. This is, by the way, how his name is pronounced. Apparently, it's not Ghali or Gali. It's Raleigh, which is a really cool name, by the way, I think. And he has got some more really interesting questions. So his first question is, do you think it's easier to make it as a solo artist or as a band? You know, again, fantastic questions. All of the three that I'm going to read out to you guys for this session. So do you think it's easier to make it as a solo artist or as a band? There's different things that come into play here. First of all, always see it from an audience's perspective first. If I'm at a concert and I see a solo artist on stage, am I going to enjoy that more than a band? Probably not, unless that solo artist is doing something to enrich his performance, right? Like maybe he's using a lot of cool stage props, or he has some other cool stuff on stage, maybe some cool lights, or maybe he has an amazing backing track. Maybe the music is great. Do I then really care if there's a band or not? Probably not. Looking at a band like 21 Pilots, that totally works for me because they pull off an amazing show. Like if you've watched any of their live material, the stuff that they do on stage is pretty fantastic. Like they have some really well choreographed pieces there. Everything is really well choreographed. So he'll just be sitting at the piano playing a couple of bars there, and then he gets up from the piano. The piano keeps playing by itself because the backing track takes over at that point. He's running to the other side of the stage while someone from the other side of the stage throws him a microphone. He catches it, runs to the front of the stage, starts singing there. Stuff like that. You know, these choreographies are really fun to watch, and everything is just really planned out so well, which makes it a fun experience for an audience. So in that case, it doesn't matter if you have a whole band with you or if it's just two of you guys, or even if you're just alone. If you have a cool show, it doesn't really matter. Does it matter on an album? Of course not, because the production is always there, right? If you're a solo artist, you can still produce the shit out of your album, have a complete band in the background, and you're still going to be the solo artist on stage. That doesn't really matter. Obviously, some of the advantages of being in a band is you have more contacts because you share the contacts with all of you guys. And if one of you knows, you know, someone from a label or, I don't know, booking agency or some managers, that's going to help the entire band. And if you have 5 people who are all in the music industry, that helps with the connections. Also, you motivate each other. That's a big part. If all of you really want to get there, if all of you really want to have the success with this band, that definitely helps. You motivate each other through those hard times when you're not so sure. Which brings us to the downsides, really. And that is, with a band, you always have to rely on everyone else. And you have a new family on top of that. Because your band is your family, essentially. You're going to spend a lot of time with them on tour buses or, you know, before gigs. And so you have to be able to communicate with all of them and get along with everyone really well. On top of that, you have to have the same vision, because if you don't share the same vision, you are going to run out of things that you can write together. I've had this plenty of times that you have great musicians, everyone likes each other, but everyone has a different vision. And so nothing really coherent comes out. If everyone tries to do their own thing in the band, that usually doesn't culminate in something that is worth listening to, because you have too many different influences in one band. And influences can be good if they're all gearing towards the same thing. Like if I like what you're doing with my music, then that can work. But if you're coming from a completely different background than me, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very difficult. You don't have any of these problems when you're a solo artist. You just have to rely on yourself. And that has its advantages and its disadvantages, obviously. If you only have to rely on yourself, no one is there to motivate you. You have to motivate yourself. You have to structure everything yourself. You have to schedule your successes for yourself. That's one of the hardest things I think about going solo. But it's also one of the best things because you can do everything yourself. You don't have to rely on anyone to keep a deadline. You record everything yourself. You know that you can get it done. If you are a hard worker, then you can be successful. If you're doing a great job, but everyone else isn't, then you can still fail. So I think you catch my drift here. In terms of like marketing, I don't think it makes a big difference. Again, as I said, the audience doesn't really care if there's 1 or 5 people on stage, as long as the show is good. That should go without saying. And your songs. Obviously, the songs are the core product that we're selling, so the songs have to be great. No question. But that should never be a question anyways. I'm never going to tell you anything else. It's never about the marketing. It really is about the songs. The marketing takes care of itself if the songs are great. Next question from Raleigh is, how important is the name of an artist? Like in my case, I have this really weird non-English sounding name. You could barely pronounce it right. Do you think I should go by a stage name? Again, it basically comes down to whatever you want to do. If you are in a certain genre, it probably makes sense to take on a stage name. Like if you're a rapper or a DJ, it seems to be common practice to have a stage name. Like, Friedemann Findeisen would probably be a bad name to go under if I wanted to become a hip-hop artist. I would probably call myself something like DJ Fried or something like that. I'd come up with something a little bit cooler than that probably, but you catch my drift. So it depends on the style, first and foremost. I think Raleigh is a cool name. Like if you pronounce it with an R, if you want to go international, that is. If you're in India, if you're going to stay in India, then Ghali is obviously going to work there. But here in Europe and in America, I think Raleigh would be is a fine stage name, actually. So just spell it out a little bit differently with an R instead of GH. So in general, yeah, it depends on whatever you want to do, man. I think if you have a weird name or a stupid name, you should probably go with a stage name, especially if it's hard to remember. I think Raleigh is easy enough to remember. Friedemann Findeisen is kind of tricky. So I would definitely go with a stage name if I were to set up a solo artist project. Again, it's up to you. If you can find something that works with your name, then I think that can be fine. Like if you're, for example, a folk artist or something like that, then it's probably better to stick with your real name because you want to bring across that authenticity and that honesty. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Yes. So next question, and this is the last one for today, and that is, how do introverts/loners gather a fan base? Is Facebook the way to go? Man, this is a great question. I'm sure a lot of people will have that same question. I myself consider myself actually a loner or an introvert. And, at times, like I'll have situations publicly, I feel very much like an extrovert. If I'm with the right people, I can be super extrovert and be talking all night long. But I have other times when I'm in groups where I feel very much introverted and like a real loner. And I have times when I really just want to be alone. And I read this definition of extroverts versus introverts a while ago that I think really rings true for me. And that is that core difference between the two is that extroverts gain their energy when they're with other people, and introverts gain their energy when they're by themselves. That really works for me. As I said, I'm kind of switching between the two. In some situations, I get energy when I'm with other people, especially now when I'm working a lot on a project. I'll be by myself a lot, and then I just need to be with other people for a little while again. Like I need to meet up with friends, sort of fill up these resources every once in a while. But if I'm with friends too much, then I need to be alone for a little while because I need to be with myself and fill up those other resources. So the reality is probably that there's kind of two tanks that we have to kind of keep level, in balance a little bit. So that put aside. So that's kind of my definition of introverts versus extroverts. How do you gather a fan base? Well, the internet is an amazing place for that, I think, because you don't need to be an extrovert to do all of this. As I said, I'm an introvert and I still have a great fan base on Facebook and on YouTube. Is Facebook the way to go? That's a hard question. It really depends on the kind of music you make and the way you want to market yourself. That's kind of the core principle. Like what's going to be your core marketing? What's going to be the core product that you release? I tried Facebook. I wanted to make Facebook my number one platform. But what I realized was that YouTube was taking off like 10 times quicker. So I switched over to YouTube, and now YouTube is my number one platform because my core medium is my videos. The artist series is my core medium. And so just the numbers told me, no, you should do YouTube. Facebook isn't going anywhere. Actually, I did some Facebook ads for the artist series as well. And those didn't do nearly as well as just putting a video up on YouTube. I actually put the videos on YouTube just as a side note because I was like, well, I have the video already. Let's just put it on YouTube as well. And YouTube just took off. Facebook, a little bit, but not really, you know? So the numbers just told me what I was supposed to do. So I guess in the beginning, it's good to be on all the platforms. Don't forget Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are probably the biggest ones because those have the most users and you will probably have a big audience there that you can speak to. And then just let the numbers tell you what's working and what isn't. Oh, SoundCloud is another one. That's kind of important. So yes, let the numbers tell you which platform is the right one. How do you gather a fan base? Well, for me, it's just, it has its advantages to be a loner sometimes, to be an introvert, because it gives you a lot of time to think about stuff. And that can be difficult as well because you tend to overthink stuff. But you can use that thinking time to really put work into a project. And with my artist series videos, I love to work on those for a really long time. And I love spending time on the research and stuff like that. That is introverts' work. You know, that's not something you do if you like going to parties a lot. For me, that really works in tandem with that. What I get from your question is, how do I gather a fan base? You're thinking of it in terms of playing the flute and telling everyone to like follow you, you know? It's not that simple. It's not really, or it actually is a lot simpler than that. People think of marketing as a separate thing from your music. It really isn't. It's really not about promoting your music. It's about getting your music out there. It sounds as it's the same thing, but it is a different thing. If your music is fantastic, if your products that you're releasing, your YouTube videos or your songs themselves and your pictures are great, people will share it by themselves, as I noticed with the artist series. Like, that's the best example I can give you. You know, I've been making videos for 1.5 years now, and all of a sudden I make these artist series videos and everything just takes off. And the algorithm of YouTube works in my favor and just sends me free traffic. I don't have to do anything. I'm not paying anything on YouTube, and I'm getting all this free traffic. So I strongly believe in the system, that the system works. If you have a great product, people are going to come. That doesn't have anything to do with being a loner or an introvert, because you're just making music. If you make great products, then the people are going to come because the platforms are interested in sending you traffic if people like it, right? YouTube's #1 goal is to keep you on their platform. They want each user to spend as much time as possible on their platform. So what are they going to do? If they see that one of the videos that is uploaded on their platform is doing really, really well, a lot of people are subscribing and watching the video until the very end, they're going to send a lot more people to that video because they know that people are going to stay on that video more likely than on some other video, right? So YouTube is interested in pushing you if you have great material, but that means you have to have great material. So that's the only thing. If you have great songs, if you have great music videos, I think the rest is going to take care of itself. So make stuff that is fantastic. One of the things I want to mention at this point is something that I think is often underestimated when making a music video. A lot of people see making a music video as kind of this job that they have to do in order to release the song as a single. What you have to realize is you have to see making a music video as a product. Even though you're not getting any money directly for it, it's going to be a direct advertiser for your music for the rest of your life. If you do it right once, you're going to have this guy, this music video, running around for you, ringing on everyone's doorbell, telling everyone how great you are. That's how you have to see it. You're making something that is going to work for you in the future. And that's why you have to put a lot of work into your music videos. It's not just so you can show your song. You have to make something that is in itself just incredible. Like, I cannot overemphasize enough how important it is to have great products. People seem to think that, oh, I made a song that's great, that's enough. The production isn't so important and the video isn't so important. That is the core of it. If you have a great video, it's really, really going to help you. It's, as I said, it's going to work for you in the future. And if you have a great music video, as I have with the artist series, right? The artist series is working for me for all eternity. People are going to look for Taylor Swift, how Taylor Swift writes a song in 10 years, maybe, if Taylor Swift is still around by then, as well. And so those videos that I made a couple of months ago are going to work for me then just as well as they are right now. And people are going to go get to my products that way. These products, these videos are working for me. And that's the same way as you should approach your music videos. So, yes, I think that answers your question, hopefully a little bit. It doesn't really matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. The only thing that I think that kind of comes out, that difference, where that kind of gets difficult, is on stage. As an introvert, you kind of have to force yourself to be a little bit more outgoing on stage. And in music videos, you might have to prepare yourself a little bit more by practicing a lot with a mirror and just forgetting everything once you're in the video. Because if you're an introvert and you're just like standing there with your arms clenched to your body and your, hands grasping the microphone really tightly, that's not going to look good in a music video. That's really the only time when that's really going to come out. And maybe in interviews, but if you prepare those well and if you have something to say, that shouldn't be a problem either. Otherwise, marketing-wise, it doesn't really make a difference. So don't really worry about that. And don't worry about the platform either. Just be on all of the platforms in the beginning and see where your stuff takes off. Instagram is another one. As I mentioned Instagram, right? And Pinterest. So if you have like a lot of pictures that you release, Pinterest might also be interesting for you. So just kind of be on all the platforms at the same time if you can. Okay, that hopefully answers your question. And that marks the end of our show. I said it's going to be an hour, and I was right. Look at that. I've been having an eye on the clock the entire time, so I was cheating a little bit. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I'm going to keep doing these every week. I enjoy this so much more than actually making the videos, because setting up the cameras and the lighting, that takes so much of my time, and I have to worry about how I look every time, and that takes away such a huge bite out of my time. And audio makes things a lot more easy for me, and also you get to listen to it in your car. And that marks the end of our episode. Hopefully you enjoyed what we talked about this week. If you want to learn more about songwriting, go to holisticsongwriting.com. I'm Friedemann from Holistic Songwriting, and thanks for listening, I guess. Cheers. I'll see you next week.